Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
We're back for another bonus episode.
This time we're doing another BookTok bonus episode. For those of you unfamiliar, this is a BookTok challenge that can be found on TikTok that we'll be doing over podcast instead. This will have our own little twist on it as well. And this one's going to be about epic fantasy genre.
So essentially, we're going to go over some categories. I'll throw these categories out, and we're going to tell you which book for us fits best into that picture, as well as a little bit about why. So with that said, let's get into it. First one. So remember, these are all, some of these, the categories will sound generic, but remember, these are all specifically about the epic fantasy or high fantasy genre. And so the first one is Show Me an Overrated Book.
Tell me. We can't really show them.
You're right. It is. These all say "show me" because on TikTok you can just do that. You can just say, "Here's the book." Yeah. So tell me about an overrated book, Barbara.
So for me, it would be, and this should not come as a shock to anybody. It would be "Name of the Wind" by Patrick Rothfuss, but a special, right? Special shout out to Twilight. Did I read those books? Yes. Did I watch all the movies? Also, yes. Is it poorly written and great to make fun of? Obviously. But for Name of the Wind, I just think it gets too much love. It's overrated. Everyone loves it and blah, 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 blah. And I just think it's overrated, especially because he can't write female characters very well. And I like well-written females, and I like to read books with well-written females. Hell, you can even be a bad character, a bad guy, but you still write them well, and he doesn't. They're just props for him. The magic system was cool and all that stuff. I just thought I would like it a lot more since everyone was like, it's so great. Is it though? Is it?
For our fans that are also Patrick Rothfuss and Name of the Wind fans listening right now, don't be discouraged. I really liked the book, and someone still recommended the sequel, which means that Barbara's going to have to read it anyway, and you'll just have to
great.
hear her talk about how much that she maybe didn't like, or maybe she'll like the sequel. Who knows? I guess we'll see when we get to that. But
I've heard the sequel isn't great either, so can't wait.
I've heard they're both good, but I also really liked the first one, so I feel like I'm going to have a particular opinion on this. But anywho, so for me, this was kind of a hard one, an overrated book that was high fantasy, because I kind of had to like rack my brain to figure out one. And I actually even think the one that I picked, well, I'll just tell you and then I'll explain it. What's going on. So I picked the Narnia books, the entire series by C.S. Lewis. And I picked it because I think that I think they're kind of cliched fantasy. I think there's a lot of religious imagery that's kind of overkill. I also think it's not fair for me to say this right now too, because I really enjoyed the Narnia books when I was a kid. And so I'm looking back on these through my adult lens and saying that, I think they're overrated. Whereas when I was a child and I remember reading them with my mom and really enjoying them. So I don't know if it's necessarily fair, but I think looking through my current lens, I say they're overrated. I think you could also easily say that they're written for a certain audience, and that audience is probably not adults. That's what I put down. Like I said, it was a tough question for me. I had trouble coming up with an overrated fantasy book. I guess I try not to read those, but
try not to read overrated fantasy books?
Well, the ones that people specifically say are overrated. I also feel like overrated is everybody's gonna have their own opinion, right? There's people out there that would tell you that your favorite book you've ever read, someone right now, Barbara, that's not you and I, could be like, you know what, Harry Potter is the most overrated series of all time.
There's a lot of
I've read comments like that. Yeah. Right. So it's very subjective, obviously.
Right.
Speaking of subjective opinions,
because people love Name of the Wind.
It's true, they do. It's one of our most popular episodes on our show, in fact. The next one is the exact opposite. Show me or tell me about an underrated. And so for me, this was kind of difficult as well. And I have to give Barbara full credit for the one I'm about to say, which is The Alchemist, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel. It's the first book in the Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series. And like I said, Barbara gets all the credit for finding this one, as well as getting me to read it. I realize I've only read the first book, but immediately after I read it, I put the entire rest of a series, which Barbara also owns, on my want to read list. I really enjoyed it. I think a lot more than I even thought I would, reading the description. It was one of those that I kind of came into it, and one was one I'd never heard of, but one that she was like, "Oh, you have to read this," and I really, really liked it. And I think you agree, right? This is kind of an underrated.
It is, because I was having trouble picking one for this because I feel like all my fantasy books that I really like are underrated. So I have a few, but I'm glad you picked that because I also believe it's underrated. I feel like a lot of people don't know about it or have heard about it. So obviously I agree.
Perfect.
Mine would be The Seven Realms, which is 4 books in the series, and then it continues with new stories, and it's Shattered Realms, and that's so I guess it takes place in the same universe, I guess, as the Seven Realms, and that those series are by Cinda Williams. I don't know how you say her last. Is it Chima? I would say it's Chima, but is it Shima? How would you pronounce that?
So, I mean, it looks kind of like Chima, but I think Shima sounds more accurate, so I'm going to lean towards that one.
Yeah. So obviously everyone knows, if you've been listening to us, that I can't pronounce anything correctly. So I'm just going to go with Cinda Williams Shima, but I have no idea if that's, so I apologize like she's listening to this. But anyways, I apologize if you really like her and I am butchering her name. It's a high fantasy YA novel, and I think the world building is really good. The magic system is really neat. The characters are all really well written. There's good representation in the second series, the Shattered Realm series. And I just really liked it. I think, and it's funny because the first book is good, but the series, I think, personally gets better and better later books, which is not often the case. I think normally sometimes they start off really good and then the series kind of dwindles. Divergent, looking at you. But this one, I feel like it's the opposite. Like, it's a really good first book, but then the other books in the series just keep getting better and better. So I would definitely recommend those, and I think they're underrated.
This is another one you recommended to me, right? Is The Demon King is the first book? Okay.
Correct. That you've read the first one.
It was really good.
So
I also recommend, I haven't read the whole series like Barbara has, but I have read the first and I bought the second because of you. So it's a safe recommendation.
You can't go wrong with a queendom. That's right. It's a queendom, not a kingdom. It's ruled by females.
Moving on. No. So the next one is, tell me about a book that got you in to epic fantasy.
So this one would be the Redwall series by Brian Jacques? Brian Jacques, whatever is his name. I remember, I don't really know how I got into this. I just remember I was really young and I saw a little mouse on the cover of this book, and I read the book or the back of it and wanted to read it. And so then I read it, and then I did like a book report over it, and I was like obsessed with the series. And it's like a massive series, right? And I believe it was from like the 80s. I think the first book came out. And I just remember being like obsessed with it and trying to figure, mind you, children, back then we did not have Google. So I didn't have no idea how to read the book in order. So I had to go to, we had a mall, and within the mall back then there was a bookstore. So I went into that bookstore whenever my mom and sister would go shopping and just sit in a corner and read the book for free. And I remember the dude got so pissed off at me because I was reading books for free. But like, I was a kid with no parents around. So it's like, what really can he do? He just kind of kicked me out, and I just come back. And I had to ask him for like what in the series was next, because I had no idea, since these were older books, and like hoping to God that they had them. And I remember I would buy one book, and I think this is the start of where I took very good care of my books, because I would buy one of the books, right? And then read it, and then return it and buy the next one in the series. And I'm pretty sure he caught on what I was doing, but he allowed me to do it anyways, which I'm very shocked that they allowed me to do this. And I think I only did it for like 3 turns until my mom found out what I was doing and was like so pissed off at me that I did that. Oops. But that definitely is, I think, where my love for fantasy stemmed from, which is ironic because I had no idea that was considered fantasy back then. It was a book about mice that lived in like medieval times, and I thought it was just so cool. And really, the books are fine. Like, they're just okay looking at it as an adult, because it kind of repeats the same stories, really, like with different animals. But back then, I thought it was just the greatest thing because I liked animals, and they were little warriors fighting for their little kingdom. It was just so great.
Yeah, I can't speak for the whole series, but I definitely read the first Redwall.
Oh, did you? I didn't realize you read them.
Just the first one. I don't think at the time I actually knew it was a series. I think I got it
Oh
from the
yeah, it's
library,
huge.
like my
It's got
school
like I think
library.
I feel like it has like over 20 books easily, I think.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, that there's like a whole shelf on our bookshelf that's full of Redwall books. So
Yeah.
I believe that.
Some of them stolen. Or I guess bought in return read and bought
There you
again.
go.
Because not stolen.
So mine on this is probably not going to be a shock for those of you that follow us on Instagram, because I feel like I was just talking about this not that long ago on Instagram. But the book that got me into epic fantasy was The Hobbit. I read that book the very first time. I wasn't actually, I could read, but I wasn't a good enough reader to be able to read it myself. So I remember my mom read it to me. And then as I got older and I was able to read it myself, I read it multiple times, to the point that my original copy no longer exists. I was very upset that the binding came apart, and because it was read so many times. But I have a new copy, which is very nice, and it's still one of my favorite books. Probably just because of that memory of reading it, not only reading with my mom and having that experience, but the fact that like it's what introduced me to what I would consider my favorite genre today. I like all of the Hobbit as well as the Lord of the Rings and all of that, but the Hobbit is what started everything for me. Next one, tell me about a book with your favorite main character. And so for me, this is actually one I read semi-recently. It's Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first in that series, the Stormlight Archive series. And the character I'm talking about is Kaladin. For those of you who have read the book, you know who I'm talking about. God, what an awesome story! Like it's one of those that it takes a little bit to get going, but once it does get going, it does. I felt like I couldn't put the book down, and a lot of that was because of Kaladin and his character. And I'm not going to go into a ton of details because I'm still trying to get Barbara to read this book. If I spoil the main character, who's my favorite main character, I feel like I'm like taking that from her, so she can't have that experience. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to read more of them. I've only read The Way of Kings so far, and I realize those of you that are listening that are Sanderson fans, God, this guy's a slacker. And I have the others on my bookshelf. I haven't. Those of you that don't know this series, like you have to understand, these are like 1,000+ page books, and so
There's a lot of them, isn't there?
There are 4 out right
So
now.
I think that's the whole reason why I didn't want to read them, was because there's so many of them, or they're incomplete.
It's
right?
The series is not complete, right? He's still writing them,
right?
Yeah, I think there's going to be 10 books. I think last I checked, that's his goal anyway.
But that's a lot to commit to.
It is. I mean, it's daunting a little bit, but it's just like the story is so good. But yeah, I loved it, and I'm excited to read the rest. But it's tricky to fit that in between books for the podcast, because it's not like others where you can squeeze a 300 or 400 or 500 page book in. Not that bad. And I remember it took me when I read Way of Kings, it took me 3 months to read it because I was reading it between other books we were reading for the show, and I had to put it down and then pick it back up. And
fair enough. As this should not come as a shock to anybody, and I feel like people are going to be like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And it's so blasé that I keep saying this, but obviously my favorite character would have to be Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series. It was just...
I'm shocked.
I know, right? And it's funny because I try picking other characters, and there's other characters that I really like, but this one really just... because it was nice to see someone in a book that I feel represented me, in the sense that she was bookish, loved to read, liked studying. That was me, and was unapologetic about it. She didn't have to hide the fact that she liked this. She didn't have to pretend that she was into other things to impress people or have friends. Like, she is just who she is. And it was really nice to get that representation as a small kid who was also like that. And it was nice to see myself in a character, because yes, I like fantasy books, but like I'm not an assassin, I'm not a mouse, I'm not any of these things. So it was nice to see myself in a character, and that's probably why I really like her. And obviously she's not perfect. She's kind of sometimes can be really bitchy and super judgmental, actually, but she still was little me, and I liked seeing that. So not a shocker there, I guess, but I had to. I tried picking someone else, but my heart just wouldn't let me.
You had to pick it. I get it. Totally get it. Let's see. Next one. Tell me about a book with your favorite magic system.
So mine would be The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series by Michael Scott. And I really like that magic system because they use I don't think this is well, I mean, is it okay to like, I mean, it's kind of everyone knows it might be spoilerish, maybe? I don't know. I don't think it's spoiler talking about the magic system. So they have,
Yeah, I don't think so either.
the magic is like you use your aura, and everybody's aura, well, I mean, so the aura comes in different colors, and different colors mean different things, and then everybody has a different scent to their aura. So when someone's like doing magic, it has a scent to it, and I thought that was really cool at the time when I was reading this as a kid. And it was just like I was like taking the quiz, like trying to take quizzes to see like what my aura would be, and then like your scent is kind of like your favorite scent or something that reminds you that you like. And some people like in the book have like gross smells, but to them it reminds them of something, or they like that smell. So I just thought that was so cool. And the magic that you have, like you have different, so you have like magicians and sorcerers and alchemists and necromancers and elementalists and like scrying and all these stuff. And then you have like, this is when I really got into different, it's not fantasy, it's just like different gods and goddesses of different cultures, because they feature all of them and they all use this magic system and everyone can use it. Literally everyone can use it. It's just how you use it. And I just thought it was really cool, and I really enjoy that, reading the magic system in those books. So
That's
that
true.
would be mine.
It's a solid choice. I really liked it. I mean, I've only read the first book, obviously, as I said earlier for these, but it's a really interesting magic system. I agree. So I'm glad you picked that one. For me on this one, I picked the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan and completed by Brandon Sanderson. The magic system in this book, it's called the One Power. And I like it because it's extremely consistent and pattern based. And what I mean by that, or the reason I say that is I feel like it's really grounded in the world, and the way that it's written makes it feel, I think it feels real. Like it doesn't, like it feels like if you're talking about our world and somebody's telling you about like how a car works, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, that's duh, that's how a car works. Like, it's that kind of like it just because in the world that he built, it feels just like something like that. Like it feels real. And once the characters know how to bend and twist a strand of the One Power, they can repeat the recipe over and over again with the same result. And the characters are consistently have to work within these rules and forced to be clever to kind of figure out they can like twist these rules to their advantage and overcome obstacles in the book. It's a very cool magic system, in my opinion. I'm not going to go into a crazy amount of detail on it, because I know that there are probably some listeners out there that have never read Wheel of Time and might be picking it up for the first time because of the TV show that's coming out on Amazon next month.
Shameless plug.
But that's true. Shameless plug for Amazon, I guess. But if you haven't read the Wheel of Time series and you're interested, Barbara would say it's another daunting series because of the amount of books, but I highly recommend getting
that
into
one
it.
is completed. How many is 7?
No, 13.
Holy crap. That's just too much, man. I like a good long series, but oof.
They're not, so the books in it, at least they're not as long as, so some of the later ones, ironically written by Brandon Sanderson, are
ironically.
But they're not as long as The Way of Kings or the Stormlight Archive series. And it's one of those, it's very much about the journey. And so if you like fantasy that is about the journey and the party and all of that, so to speak, it definitely up your alley.
I can't comment on it because I haven't read those.
Let's see. Next one. Tell me about a book with your favorite world bending. World bending?
How does one bend a world, Megan?
Bend the world. Tell me about a book with your favorite world building. I picked The Way of Kings again, which it's technically not just The Way of Kings, I guess, but specifically the Stormlight Archive, because I mentioned the world that he built, Sanderson, in that book called Roshar. But technically, you could even expand it beyond that and just say like the entire Cosmere, which for those of you that are Brandon Sanderson fans know is the universe that a large amount of his books take place in. And there's tiny threads connecting series to other series inside that universe. And so my overarching pick would be all of the books inside the Cosmere. But if I had to pick a single book, it would be Way of Kings, because that was the introduction to Roshar, which is a very, very, very interesting world. Yep, that's my pick.
Is that the one that's all connected? Is that his?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you actually read one in the Cosmere when we read Elantris.
Is that in Rosher? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's in the Cosmere. So the Cosmere is
Oh
the
my gosh.
universe.
Okay. Okay.
Rashar is the world that the Way of Kings and the other Stormlight Archive
Okay.
books takes place on.
Okay. Confusing. Okay. Mine would be City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Yes, nailed it. Nailed it. Gosh, I had so much fun when we were recording this podcast and I could not say that. I was so bad.
You got it first
Anyways,
time though.
I know. I was practicing. I just, it was just so an interesting world that she built based off of, actual culture, actual places, I guess you would call it, or locations or history or past of, So I think she
history.
took that as a base for it and then built upon that and made this like magical place with it. And I was so intrigued by it. I really liked it. And things that I like about world building or these fantasy lands that I read about is it has to feel like it was lived in, and hers obviously did. And I really enjoyed it and I wanted to read more about it, obviously. So I thought that was probably one of my favorite world buildings. But I do have to do a special shout out to Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard for the same reason. She's very good at world building. It feels like a lived in location. So, but City of Brass is just chef's kiss to me.
It was, yeah. I think we talked about that when we did this episode, how amazing the world was that she built.
Another shameless plug. Go check out our episode about City of Brass if you want to hear more about that book. It's great.
You should also check out our bonus episode we did on Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. That was Barbara's special mention because the world building there was also really impressive. But enough about world building. Tell me about your favorite book with dragons.
Mine would be Seraphina, the Seraphina duology, technically, by Rachel Hartman. I noticed that I'm doing a lot of YA books here because these are all YA fantasy and not necessarily other types of fantasy. I think I tend to enjoy more of YA fantasy just because YA fantasy tends to be more, which is hilarious because most of these are all, well, Michael Scott isn't, but most of them tend to be, well, no, they have. Anyways, I like female authors that write fantasy because they actually write female characters well, and we tend not to be the damsel in distress characters. Like, we have badass female characters, and that's probably why I gravitated towards more of the YA fantasy. I feel like the adult fantasy novels are getting much better, and more female authors are breaking into the fantasy world for the adults. And some of the guys are getting better at writing females, but like I remember I was a kid and stuff like that, like it just wasn't doing it for me. So that's probably why I picked more of the YA fantasy people. But anyways, mine is, I digress. Seraphina Duology by Rachel Hartman, based on this half dragon. She's half dragon, half human. And all of the dragons in the book aren't your stereotypical, like what you think of dragons. Like they are they can transform into like your stereotypical looking dragon. The base of them is this dragons live with humans in this kind of okay agreement, and they can pass off as looking as humans in their human form, except like you can tell when they're not. And then they have these little half-breeds creatures where you're not supposed to, because they're not, like, dragons aren't supposed to marry or have children with humans. But you have the set of characters, and they all have like scales that you can tell that they're dragons on them, but they have like magical abilities that make them really cool. And I just thought that was just a neat way of writing dragons in the world that she built, and the characters and how they have to deal with being a dragon and a human was really, really neat. And I really enjoyed those books. So you got to check them out. Good book.
That sounds really interesting. I feel like I want to check those out after hearing your description.
Yeah, I have them, obviously. Very good books. I really enjoyed them.
So I can check them out from our library at home?
Yeah, you sure can. You have to pay a small fee because you owe some books, so you know.
So for me, for the dragons, I have a tie. So if this was a TikTok video, I'd be holding up 2 books for this challenge, but it's not. So I'm just going to talk about them. So for mine, it was a tie between A Song of Ice and Fire, the series, not necessarily one book in particular, or The Hobbit. And I think if you made me, like if right now Barbara had a gun to my head and was forcing me to pick one of these, I think I'd lean towards The Hobbit because of the same reasons I said earlier, just the memories I have associated with that book. And I love the character of Smaug, but I also really like the dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire books as well.
Yeah, but you haven't read all of them, and the first book doesn't really have like the baby dragons are literally just hatched in like the last few chapters of that book. So
I've read the first 2 books though, and the dragons are more prevalent in
not
book 2.
really. There's still little baby dragons in the second book too.
One day I'll read all of the books, but I've stopped for the same reason that
I feel like
stopped.
You're basing that off of the TV series. Dude, I stopped reading them because his dead ass is going to die before he finishes, and I hate that crap. So I'm not about to, like, I made a promise to myself that I would not finish the series until he at least, finish reading the series until he at least finished the series. Because, like, I do not want to have, because I enjoyed the books, obviously. I've read, I think, 4 of them. I've read 4 of them.
Fine. Okay, fair enough. So I won't, it's not a tie then. It's just The Hobbit. I love the character of Smaug. I mean, obviously, you know, as a kid reading it and imagining the dragon and those scenes, it was also really cool as an adult to get to see Smaug realized on the big screen in the movie. That obviously,
my treasures.
Yes, that was really cool. I felt like seeing that. I think what's funny, like, I love obviously these books and these movies for the Middle Earth and the Lord of the Rings and all of that, but I think I was more excited for the second Hobbit movie because of Smaug than I was the first one, just because like it was like I remember that
not
stuff.
Talking about the movies. This is books, Michael. This is BookTok.
I've gone on a tangent, which
and we all know
Barbara,
that you
Barbara
prefer
never
the movies
does.
over the books. And
Whoa! No,
because you can't even remember that there was even a spider in the Lord of the Rings. So embarrassing.
Yeah. I've seen the movies more recently than I've read the books, which is something that needs to be corrected. But
okay, well,
I don't favor them over the books.
I too have seen the movies more recently than reading the books, and I still remember there was a spider in it. So.
Hey guys, my name's Abby and I co-host the Book Life podcast with my best friend Mo. We cover fantasy, sci-fi, and historical fiction books and talk book-related topics like our favorite character types, world building, and books versus their movies. New episodes drop every Monday on your favorite platform. Now, back to your show.
Move on to the next one. So this one's talking about tell me about a book that has your favorite assassin. And I have a tie on this one too, which they do it on TikTok, so I think it's fair to do it on the podcast.
So go ahead and just pick the second option because nobody wants to talk about the first one.
That's just rude. But
no.
I'm going to talk about both of them. So I picked...
we don't have time.
We have plenty of time. I picked 2 books. Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. So if you've read any of the Throne of Glass series,
if you've been on the BookTok, then everyone... talk about an overrated series.
Barbara has never read these books, but has a thorn in her side about Sarah J. Maas for some reason, which we'll get into at another time, perhaps. But
sorry, I'll stop interrupting you. Continue with your crappy favorite finished, assassin. Yeah, I'll see myself out.
So I picked these. So I picked that one because I really like the character of. I don't know if it's pronounced Selena or Selena. It's spelled differently in the book, but I'm going to go with Selena. I really like her character. She's such a badass in these books. The challenges in the first one, and anyway, she is an assassin. I'm not going to go into details for the plot again because there might be people out there that are going to read them who aren't Barbara and don't hate them for no reason. This is going to be a
spoiler episode, like most of our BookTok, most of our bonus episodes are. So
she's clearly a badass assassin. Like she's got the moves. It's the action scenes in these books when it comes down to like her and doing what she needs to do. And like the overarching plot is that she is an assassin that's been arrested and is actually serving out her time in effectively a prison camp. It's like a prison mine. And the king's son pulls her out of this to be his champion in the king's tournament that he's hosting. And if she wins, then she gets her freedom, but has to be the king's assassin, like to do his bidding afterwards. Is kind of the overarching. I think you can read that on the back of the book. I don't think there are any spoilers there, but it's a really good book. I like her character. There's so many books like the one I'm going to mention second that have awesome assassins in them, but but they're mostly men. You don't see a lot of, or at least you didn't for a long time, see a lot of these like badass female characters, and that's one thing I really like about the Throne of Glass series is
maybe because you weren't reading them. Did you ever think of that?
because she is a badass character.
Are you just going to ignore my comment?
Yep, sure am. And the other book that I'm going to touch on that I think is a tie here, but I really enjoyed is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, which is the first book of the Gentleman Bastard series or trilogy. I think it's a trilogy, and it's also the assassin in there is really cool. It's kind of a hybrid, like assassin, rogue, thief kind of a deal, but there's a little bit of everything in there, and I really enjoyed the story there as well, and especially the characters in it. So.
Mine would be From Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. Would be Sarasa Sarn. Sarosa. Is that how did we decide that her name was Sarasa Sarn? She really enjoyed it. I love assassins. I love female assassins. I love that she's older. It's not, like a little 16-year-old. And it's like, oh, I'm a great assassin. It's like, you're 16. Really? How much training have you really had in murdering people? And she's a badass, and she's hilarious, and she had the best lines ever, and she was everything I wanted my sassy assassin queen to be. So, for show, she's my favorite assassin. Easily, hands down.
That was definitely a solid choice. I reading that after you took your notes on this one, I was like, oh, it's such a good pick.
I know, better than your crappy Throne of Glass lady. So
okay, I mean, I don't think that the jabs are necessary. I'm not attacking your picks in this list of things. So.
Because you can't, because I have great picks.
I also feel like, and if you're listening
to this... And this is the only one I've attacked, for the record.
If you're listening to this and you follow us on Instagram, I would love to know if you think it's fair for Barbara to attack books that she's never read personally.
I don't need to read crappy written books by crappy authors, so...
But how can you know that without...
Because I've seen or people read excerpts of her crappy written books, and she's not a great author. She's not a good writer, Michael.
And she knows this from excerpts she's heard read.
Yes, because people were complaining about how she wrote, and so I was reading some. I was like, God, this is such... It's like Twilight. Like, what's her face cannot write. She's an awful writer. Just trash and garbage. Everyone knows that. They still like the books. It is what it is.
Well, I guess, for the 400,000 people out there who read the first book and gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, Barbara's coming for you.
No, I'm not coming for you. You're allowed to like crappy books. That's fine. It's just people, you know why women like it? Because they're quote unquote spicy. No, thank you. Not really a thing for me.
I don't see any. I think that you're getting this confused with her other series.
It doesn't matter. She's still a piss poor writer. That doesn't change the fact just because of a crap like the other series. Anyways,
I don't think it's fair to judge someone you've never read a book from, but
I can judge.
You know how I feel about that because we've had this conversation.
We had this argument, not a conversation. We have arguments over this.
Yes. So the next one, tell me about your favorite book with elves.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I don't really know if I read a lot of books with elves, to be honest with you. Like the only one
we had the same thought.
Right. Like the only one that I was just a clear-cut easy choice for me was the Lord of the Rings series by obviously Tolkien. Like I really don't know if I've read anything else with elves. And if I have, I'm like, ooh, I don't remember, I guess. I'm not sure. But obviously Legolas was my jam, and I love the elves in the series, and I thought they were really cool. And maybe I don't know. I could have sworn I've read books with elves because they're dark elves and all.
Haven't you read Aragon?
Only the first one, and I'm not a fan. Not a fan of those series. Yeah,
there's elves in that book.
Yes,
right?
there are. Yeah, the chick, but she's. I don't know. I wasn't a fan of the Aragon. I even owned the first book. I just wasn't a huge fan of it. And don't let me get started on this crap movie that they freaking produced of that one. But whatever.
Good thing we're not talking about movies, right?
We're not, yeah. But yeah, Lord of the Rings. I really liked all the elves in those series. But speaking of the movies, shout out Orlando Bloom. You're my favorite elf ever. And I also like that they added the new character, the girl elf in. What is her name? She's not in the books. She's literally just a movie lady.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm glad that they added a female elf character, because as much as I love Tolkien, he did female dirties as well. But anyways.
Tauriel, is that who you're talking about?
I don't know.
Are you talking about the one that was played by the girl from Lost, the TV show?
Yes.
Yeah, Tauriel.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. I just know that she wasn't in the books, and that's
she was not
too bad.
Yeah. But so yeah, I mean, I actually also picked Lord of the Rings on this one. I got to this question And I was sitting there thinking about it, this question, I guess this choice, and I was sitting there thinking about it, and like elves are so prolific in fantasy. Like I play a lot of fantasy video games, and I feel like in every fantasy RPG, like that's a race you can choose as elf.
I know, but like when you think about books, you can't think of any, right?
I know, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, there's obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the Lord of the Rings. So my first thought is like, okay, Michael, that's your favorite, one of your favorite series. That's why that's all you can think of. Like, let's Google this. I'm sure there's some other books with elves that you've read. And I couldn't come up with any. Like I was looking at like lists and I was like, okay. I mean, I found a lot of books I want to read that have elves in them, but yeah, I think my shelves and my reading history are elf poor, so to speak.
I know, that's I was just mind boggled because I feel like I know so much about elves. Like there's like druid elves and there's dark elves and whatever elves and all this stuff. And I was like, where the heck do I know all this information from? Like, I mean, it must have been from a book. Clearly not. I have no idea.
For me, it's got to be from games. Like
I don't play those games, so that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
That's true. I don't know. I
like
it's just one of those things. Like I felt like I should have had more than that. But
right. I was a little disappointed in myself. I was like, I can't think of anything else but the Lord of the Rings, which is not bad. Like I really liked the elves in the Lord of the Rings. It's just I was a little disappointed. I had no other choice.
But I mean, part of me like felt a little bit of shame for not having more to choose from on that, because like I know, obviously I know you've never played like any of the Skyrim or any of those games from that series, but like I've played quite a few elf characters in the Elder Scrolls games, and that's where I know a lot about elves. I was like, God, how do I not have more books? But anyway, we digress. I digress. Last one. Tell me about a sequel that you can't wait for. Mine is the follow-up to Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. When I finished that book, oh my God, I was so amped and at the same time pissed because I couldn't go out and buy the second book and read it right away, because we bought and read this one like right when it came out, you know, when we did that episode. I loved the first book. I literally can't wait for the sequel. And I can tell you right now, spoiler alert for our podcast, whenever that book comes out, me and Barbara are going to read it, and there's probably going to be a bonus review episode on it. So
100%. Plus, Victoria Aveyard is the bomb, and you should watch her on TikTok. She is hilarious. She TikToks so freaking well.
We need to read her other series.
I have her other series.
I know. Yes. I said we need to read it, not we need to buy it. I know.
A mouse in your pocket. I have it.
I haven't read it though. We both need to read it. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I love Realmbreaker. If you want to hear more about mine and Barbara's thoughts on Realmbreaker, go listen to our bonus review where we talked about it for like an hour. But I
know that was such a long one because we're like, yes, love, gush.
Such a good book.
Good pick.
I was just going to say it's funny that like that made it onto the list for me, because like we talked about in the episode how it was like, and she I think it said that it was her love letter to Tolkien and Lord of the Rings because she loves those books so much. And I talked about the Wheel of Time series, which I think also has some elements of those books too. And as far as like, it's all about the journey.
I was going to say you love a great adventure journey.
I do.
Like fantasy books.
I do.
I've noticed.
That's true. I do.
And that's literally right up your alley. That
it is. Yeah. I loved it.
Except for better written females. Everything you want. Yeah. At least for me. I know, as a male, you don't give it a flying F because you have really well-written male characters in your favorite genre. But as a female who likes that genre, it's crack-a-lackin'. But I'm glad that it's becoming more of a thing now.
To say I don't give a flying F is not really fair. Like I was just talking about one of the reasons I like the Throne of Glass series so much is because of the badass female main character.
Of all the things you had to mention that. Of all of the things you had to mention that freaking book. Now you're just doing it on purpose.
Anyway, what's the sequel you can't wait for?
Anyways, the sequel I can't wait for is... I feel like I'm doing a lot of shameless plugs here. Not on purpose, mind you. But we are reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Is how would you say that? Muir?
I think that's right, yeah.
For the podcast later this month, or for the October month. And I finished that this weekend, and I freaking loved it. And so I don't want to give too much away because, you know, obviously we're going to talk more in depth about this in a later podcast, but I cannot wait for Harrow the Ninth. And I'm slightly angry at life in general that the next book isn't coming out until 2022. And I believe the next one after that isn't until 2023 or 4.
Correct. No, 3.
Do they have that
2022
right?
and 2023 are the...
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Even though technically this one the Herod the Ninth just came out. And so originally this was supposed to be a trilogy, and I don't know if like the third book is going to be one of those like in between books or an actual book of the series. I'm a little bit confused by that because at the whole point or the whole time this was billed as a trilogy. So now I'm a little confused as if it's going to be a trilogy or if it's going to be 4 books now in the series, or if this is just going to be like a companion book. But either way, I have to wait, and I'm not happy that I have to wait because I'm an impatient human. But I'm extremely excited to read Herod the Ninth because I freaking loved Gideon the Ninth. And I'm just, maybe this pick is a little biased because I literally just finished the book and was just like in love with it. So
spoilers for our regular episode coming up later this month.
I know, my bad. But that's why I didn't want to say too much. But I'm obviously excited. I can't just not say that, like, I can't wait for a sequel, Herod the Ninth, and that's all I'm saying. Like, I had to give something, right?
So you gotta
give
a
little something, you know. So that is my pick with, you know, Realm Breaker a close second on there. I'm feeling like this one's kind of more like books either that hasn't come out yet or just you haven't read. Period.
So that's like that. So I was thinking when I read this that it was ones that haven't come out yet. Because
that's how I read it too.
Otherwise, I would have there are obviously a lot of books I've talked about in this list that are like the beginning of series that I am like The Way of Kings that I've said like 4 times. I can't wait to read the rest of them. But I feel like there's 4 of those out. Like that's my fault. I haven't read them. Like, you know.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. So we're on the same page with that one. That's kind of how I took it too.
Yeah.
Because if not, then obviously like the next one is City of Brass. I'm excited for, and like all these other ones that I haven't read yet. But
yeah. Well, that's it. That's all we've got for the BookTok challenge. If you guys are listening right now and you are on TikTok and you're familiar with these BookTok challenges and you see one and you're like, God, it'd be really cool if Badass Literature Society went through this one, send it to us.
Yeah.
Send it to our email, send it to us on either Instagram or Facebook, just like the link. If you guys have one we'd like to do, we'd love to do it. These are fun to do. Barbara has found both of these so far and they've both been enjoyable.
On BookTok, so
sure we could find some more. But if you guys have one you see that you think would be cool for us to do, please send it over. We'd love to do one that you guys are into. But as always, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We are Badass Literature Society. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, let us know. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen. That's really important. It really helps us out a lot. And if you've got a book recommendation or something you'd like to see in these bonus episodes, something you'd like to see us talk about, let us know. Send us a message on Instagram or Facebook or wherever and get in touch. Let us know what's up. Speaking of Instagram and Facebook, follow us in both places. Our handle is @BadassLitPod. And with that, we will see you guys later this month for our regular episode where we're reviewing Gideon the Ninth. I'm Michael.
And I'm Barbara.
Bye.
Bye.